Okay, so this is my first training run. It's not technically a training run. You can't see me. It's still 5:30 in the morning. Um, I I'm following the 80-20 method, where you run 80% of your training runs under your aerobic threshold. So how do I calculate that? Um, there are a lot of ways, but I am using what worked for me in the past, which is the MAF method, where you subtract 180, or sorry, you subtract your age from 180, and there are some variables that you need to take into consideration, and you get your heart rate. So the goal for you is to keep your heart rate under that number and just keep doing it over and over. And once you establish a baseline for about 3 to 4 weeks, I plan to slowly add in some tempo and threshold workouts. So that's the plan. Today, this being the first workout, my goal is to establish a baseline. So what I'm planning to do is warm up for about 10 minutes and run 3 miles under the MAF threshold. So I establish baseline on what are my splits essentially, and I'll repeat this test after 4 weeks to see if there is any improvement, and everything else that follows will be based off of that. All right, so I'll finish off my workout and we'll get back and look at the results. All right, I am 1.5 miles in. I'm having to walk because I have to keep my heart rate under 147, maybe 148. So it's very slow, and that's how it is. The MAF method, there's a lot of walking and jogging involved. It's a little frustrating because I just want to run. So I'm averaging about, the first mile I averaged about 13-minute pace. This is my second mile. I think I'm going to be averaging about 14-minute pace, which is fine. I'm not in a rush, so it's okay. It's a great way to prevent injury. As I said, it worked really well for me when I was biking. So you build up the base, spend majority of your time in your aerobic threshold zone, and this is really the first day of me doing that. So hopefully, as time progresses, I'll get faster. So, all right. Okay. So I finished running my 3 miles. I wouldn't call this running because I was jogging most of the time. As I mentioned, I must keep my heart rate around 147, 148 to build that base, and I normally run about, if I'm running a 5k, I'm at usually around 9:30, 9:45 pace, but I don't really check my heart rate then. But because my focus is to focus on just keep my heart rate under 148, I really had to run and walk and run and walk. So, but I feel great though, because I didn't work really hard at all. It feels really good. At any given point in time during the 40 minutes that I spent running, I was never out of breath. That's a good sign. So, okay, week 1, day 1. We'll head back and look at my Strava to see how I did. All right, see you. Okay, so I'm back, refreshed, had a nice shower. So let's see how I did on today's workout. So I ran 3 miles. As I mentioned, I am using the MAF method. This is really a test to establish a baseline. And you're supposed to actually run 5 miles, and 3 miles is okay too. I didn't have the time to run the full 5 miles. But the idea here is that you keep your heart rate over the course of the run, the duration of the run, under your MAF heart rate threshold. In my case, the MAF heart rate is around 147, 148. So as you can see here, my average heart rate for this 3 miles is 146. So it's pretty good. But the downside, as I mentioned during my workout, is I was super slow. As you see here, my average pace is 13:54, almost 14 minutes per mile. I usually run this track at around 9:30. This felt really slow, but that's not a bad thing. As I mentioned, I followed this method during my cycling to build my base, and it was super helpful to sustain for a longer period of time and without getting injured. That's really the key. And it takes time, but I am confident that this base building phase, the first 3 or 4 weeks that I'm going to spend of my 21 weeks of marathon training, I think this is going to help me out. So let's look at how my splits. So as you see here, the first mile I was at 13:05 with an average heart rate of 144. The second mile 14:07 with an average heart rate of 146, and the last mile 14:30 with an average heart rate of 147, which is really expected because you are fresh when you start off your MAF test and you are slightly faster. And as time progresses, as you run more and more, fatigue kicks in and you get slower and slower. So if you don't get slow or you run negative splits during the MAF test, you are doing it wrong. So this is good. Now that this is my baseline, what follows next is to keep running under the MAF threshold for about 3 or 4 weeks and revisit the same test, and we'll have to compare if I made any progress or not. And I feel great because this is not hard running. This is a very easy pace, not quite recovery pace. It's slightly faster than recovery, but not quite threshold either. So it felt really good. I don't feel any soreness whatsoever. I did some dynamic stretching before I started this, and I did some static stretching after my run. So feels great. So yeah, so that's today's run. This is really a baseline. This is week 1, day 1 of my training, and I established a baseline. Now let's try to improve this over the course of next 21 weeks and see how it goes. All right, we'll see you again after next workout. Bye.